Hello everybody, and today I am going over my TBR, or the way that my TBR is currently looking. But if you know that technically I had 0 at the start of, or at the end of 2024, then you know, this is looking a little bit full, right? So it is at the fullest that it's been all year. Basically I went into 2025 with 12 books on here because that was basically like the books that had been excluded from my 0 TBR project. So the Dandelion Dynasty series, the books that I was gifted for Christmas, books that I bought during December, those were all excluded from that project, and that left me with 12 books starting the year. And currently there are 18 on here, and I'm actually lucky because normally book number 19 would have arrived earlier this week, but book number 19 is facing some logistical issues in getting to me, which is actually for the benefit of my TBR at the moment. But so I am counting in my TBR both the books on this shelf and the books that I am currently reading. In my sort of like spreadsheet that I do for these books in my Notion app, I do like only count them as being off of the TBR the moment that I finish them. So I am going to respect that within this video, but I'm going to gloss over the ones that I'm currently reading. So, currently reading Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher, about halfway through, I think just over halfway through this one. This is my commute book. It is a book about a paladin whose god has died, and so now he is looking for a new direction in his life. Basically, he has been taken in by the Order of the Rat and has to do assignments for them. And while on assignment, he meets this woman who is running away from a creep on the streets, and they kind of have an instant attraction for one another. And so, yeah, I'm very much enjoying this so far. Slow burn romance with a very much green flag protagonist on both sides, but he is a guy who handles a sword but is also knitting in his spare time. So yes, first book that I'm reading. Then I'm also reading The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. This is epic fantasy about a woman sword trainer who basically at the beginning of this book kind of thwarts the plans of somebody high in power, and so he decides to have her assassinated or have her like imprisoned, and she is like saved on the way to prison and is now involved in a sort of like rebel group of women who are training and living outside of regular society. And then the final book that I'm currently reading, a book that is responsible for like 1/8 of the page count on my TBR, is Speaking Bones by Ken Liu. So I have 18 books on there, but this one is very much responsible for the majority of the page count because it is over 1,000 pages long. This is the final book in the Dandelion Dynasty. As I said, this was a massive exception to my 2024 0 TBR project because I just knew when these arrived in September, like there's no way that I'm gonna get to 0 TBR if I count them. So I was like, these are gonna go into the into the 2025 TBR because I also didn't want to be rushing myself with these, and I'm very happy to be reading them now. I'm enjoying myself a whole lot with them, but it is a massive book. So yes, it is on the August TBR by this time next week. It is normally done, hopefully, because I don't want to make it like such a last minute thing that it's still there on the Sunday. Now, the books that I haven't touched yet, though some of them are definitely for the September TBR, so 7 out of, no, not the 7 out of these, 6 out of these, one more needs to be added to the TBR, which I think will start shipping next week, but so 7 will eventually, 7 TBR books will be on my September TBR, but 6 out of these ones will be on there. Let's start off with, yeah, that's gonna make a mess. Let's start off with this one. This is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This is a Canadian, I think, YA classic. It isn't all that well known, I feel like, here, or like definitely during my childhood. I'd never heard of this one. This is very much one that I've only really started hearing about when I joined BookTube, and yeah, it is a classic that I want to give a go, and actually this one is going to be on September TBR because I think that this sort of very much fits the mood of this book, or like the aesthetics that I've seen around. And yes, we have a guest who's going to make her opinion known, because Faith has been very unhappy with the cheaper food I bought her. Next up we have The Impusium by Olga Tokarczuk. The Impusium, a health resort horror story. So this is a retelling or a reinterpretation of Thomas Mann's The Magic Mountain by Olga Tokarczuk. And so we see a young Pole who is suffering from tuberculosis, who is arriving in a guest house for gentlemen, a health resort in the Silesian mountains. Every evening the residents gather to imbibe the hallucinogenic local liquor and debate the great issues of the day. Monarchy or democracy? Do devils exist? Are women born inferior? War or peace? Meanwhile, disturbing things are happening in the guest house and the surrounding hills. Someone or something seems to be watching, attempting to infiltrate this cloistered world. Little does the newcomer realize, as he tries to unravel both the truths within himself and the mystery of the sinister forces beyond, that they have already chosen their next targets. So, yeah, I have always had an interest in Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain, but I've decided that I'm not going to read it first. I was debating that because I was like, I really want to read this one, but I want to read The Magic Mountain first if I'm going to do that. But in the end I was like, you know, whatever I decide to read first is going to leave an impression, and so reading this one first and then going back to the source material can be just as interesting as doing it the other way around. And maybe if I very much dislike The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, that would actually turn me off of The Impusium by Olga Tokarczuk, and I do feel like I have more of a chance of liking this one than I have of liking The Magic Mountain. Another, let's keep with like another classic. I mean, not that The Impusium was a classic, but at least it was a play on a classic. And we have Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. So the classic French story of a woman who I believe has a extramarital affair. And yeah, I have been meaning to read this one for a very long time. And I must say that I was pleasantly surprised by this one, because in my mind this is a massive classic. So when I found it I was like, oh, it's actually not that big at all. So much more reasonable to read. Yeah, I think we don't have anything classically like in the sphere of classics. So let's move on to something completely different then. This is Hunger by Choi Jin Young. This was brought to my attention by Natalie, one of my subscribers and somebody who is on my Discord as well. And this is a Korean translated book about a woman who has just killed her husband and is devouring him. If you're not new to this channel, you know that I'm creepily attracted to books about cannibalism, so this had to go on the TBR. Next up, a book that I don't actually fully remember what it is about, but this cover is definitely what's pulled me into it, and that is Green Dot by Madeline Gray. This is, in my opinion, a stunning minimalist cover, and so let's read the back again. Hera is in her mid-20s. She has been trying and failing to build a life she cares about. But then she meets Arthur. He walks with her, he is older than her, and he is married. But in her soulless office, he is a source of much-needed entertainment, and though Hera has previously dated women, she falls headlong into a love affair that will consume her life. Green Dot is a story about the terrible allure of wanting something that promises nothing and the winding, torturous, often hilarious journey we take in deciding who we want to be. So, potentially going to be quite frustrating, because I do find books with affairs quite often quite frustrating, because I kind of feel like that is going nowhere, but I am still intrigued to see this particular book and this take on it, and yeah, see what it does with the trope, with the theme, I guess. Next up we have A Voyage of the Basilisk, a memoir of Lady Trent, the third book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. I was gifted this book by Ewald, thank you so much. Yeah, the Memoirs of Lady Trent series is a series in which we're following a woman who, against the sort of role that society places on her, because let's imagine this is sort of like Victorian era England in terms of the society that is being represented. According to those those rules, she should just be at home, married to a husband, producing offspring and taking care of them, but not really taking care of them because there's a nanny for that. So basically just whiling away in boredom while dealing with sort of like society and the gossip of rumors of what is happening in the high echelons of society. However, she, from a young age onward, has had a huge interest in dragons, and so her big hope is to one day be able to study dragons out in the wild. Moving on, we have The Expanded Earth. All I really remember about this one is this is very much a sort of like impulsive pickup. I saw this in the bookstores, I loved the cover, I had never heard of this book, so I was like, yeah, give that to me. And as far as I know, like the one thing I know about it, it has like shrunken down people in it, but let's read the back, right? Humankind has been reduced to the height of handspan, a transformation that is both potentially lethal and exasperatingly inconvenient. On a remote coastal path, Giles awakes in his new body to discover a world reshaped and magnified into a place of astounding abundance and deadly peril. Desperate to reconnect with his loved ones, he seeks the help of fellow survivors, and together they embark on a quest across the altered landscape. But as their journey unfolds, the more the question persists: are they still truly human, or has their reduction in size marked the beginning of a descent into savagery and evolution into something other? Elsewhere, 1 week earlier, Professor Elizabeth Goodwin makes a monumental discovery. God is alive and physically among us, but not in the form we've been taught to expect. As Goodwin prepares to make first contact with the omnipresent, ocean-spanning creature, forces conspire in the wings, and the spectre of imminent catastrophe inches closer and closer still. Those Below, sequel to Those Above by Daniel Polanski. I have to reread Those Above in order to be able to read Those Below. These covers are absolutely stunning. This is a rebellion story, so we have those who live above, those who live below. Obviously those above are the ones who are oppressing those below, and so this is a sort of like uprising story. It's very slow moving, and I remember that for a lot of the first book I was quite confused, but by the end of it I thought it was like masterfully laid out, and that, you know, you really got to see the full scale of the conflict and really got to know the setup in full detail. Unfortunately I didn't continue at that point, and because I know how confusing book one, like confusing is saying a lot, but like how that there was mental work that had to be put in book one, I cannot just go into book two, I need to reread book one, and that is where we get into a problem, because currently there's just like so much books that I'm reading that it's always like difficult for me to like plan in a reread. I had a reread planned for August. I am not gonna make it. So yeah, this is a problem to tackle in the final half of 2024, because I would definitely love for that book at the very least to be gone, because that one was gifted to me over Christmas, so technically according to my 1 year rule it has to be read before Christmas again. 7 Recipes for Revolution by Ryan Rose. This is a revolution in the kitchen type of story. It is a fantasy story, which, I mean, that probably didn't sound like it, but basically it's just like the system rigged against them type of like competition within the culinary sphere, and then like breaking the system from within type of story. This is a book that I am going to be needing for r/fantasy, and it is a book that I'm using as well for Herkiet as the July release, so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that. And that also should tell you that I'm going to be reading this pretty soon, because for Herkiet I need to read it within 60 days of its publication. One of the most recent things to have landed on my doorstep is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by Victoria Schwab. This is the Illumicrate special edition for it. It is absolutely stunning. It is a vampire book, and honestly speaking, that's more or less all I still remember about this book, and I'm gonna keep it like that, I think. I am very much looking forward to sapphic vampires, and I'm going to keep the plotline of this just out of my mind. Feel free to look it up if you are curious, but this book has also been everywhere, so it wouldn't surprise me if you actually already know what it is about. Ugh. And then, final 5 books. First up, we have Another one of these sequels for which I need to reread the first one. This is the Ashfire King sequel to The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is a release that I've so much been anticipating that it just pains me that we're here. Like, how have I still not read this book? I mean, I know why, because I just never seem to be able to fit in The Stardust Thief, because it was also on the August TBR. It isn't happening. September TBR is looking massive, so October, I guess, so that I can read it in November. Maybe November needs to be like the month of the sequels, because in November we have Will of the Many coming out, we have the Blackfire Blade, right, coming out. So maybe if I just need to add those below and the Ashfire King to the November TBR and just have November be the month of the sequels in order to tackle these then. But so, yeah, I don't fully remember what the Stardust Thief was about. It is Arabian-inspired fantasy. I guess she's a thief character. I do believe she has to set off on a mission together with the Crown Prince or somebody that the Crown Prince has assigned to her. Yeah, that's all I really remember. There are Jinn involved as well, but I loved The Stardust Thief, and when I finished it I wanted to continue, and it's like from that year it was it was maybe the fantasy book that I read that I most wanted to read the sequel for, and then everything else I read that year got the sequel the next year, and this one I had to wait for. But, you know, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I don't remember anything about it, but it's definitely highly anticipated, so I am very much looking forward to being able to reread The Stardust Thief and go straight into Ashfire King. This whole thing is now an organizational mess that I need to clear. Next up, we have Grave Empire by Richard Swan. This is the broken binding, just clearing me of my money because of that amazing and paper design. Because I have read a Richard Swan. I did not like the Richard Swan I read, but I saw this cover, I saw those end pages, and I was like, yeah, give it to me. I need it. And now I'm like, I need to read this before the sequel comes out, because the sequel has an equally gorgeous cover, and I'm like not going to buy it unless I know that I like this book. This is set in the same world as the other series by him, which is like, it starts with the Justice of Kings. A lot of people love it, but it's very crime focused, which I hate in my fantasy. So what was this one about again? I'm kind of fearing that it was also crime focused. So it was also one of those, you shouldn't be touching them. Blood once turned the wheels of empire, now it is money. A new age of exploration and innovation has dawned, and the Empire of the Wolves stands to take its place as the foremost power in the known world. Glory and riches await. But dark days are coming. A mysterious plague has broken out in the pagan kingdoms to the north, while in the south the Empire's proxy war in the lands of the Wolfmen is weeks away from total collapse. Worse still is the message brought to the Empress by two heretic monks who claim to have lost contact with the spirits of the afterlife. The monks believe this is the start of an ancient prophecy heralding the end of days, the Great Silence. It falls to Renata Rayner, a low-ranking ambassador to an enigmatic and vicious race of mermen, to seek answers from those who still practice the arcane arts. But with the road south beset by war and the empire on the brink of supernatural collapse, soon there may not be a world left to save. So, the good thing about this is it is not a crime-based fantasy, it is empire-based fantasy, it is diplomacy-based fantasy, so that sounds like it is right up my alley. So I'm hoping to absolutely love this one. This is the final chance I will give to Richard Swan. I mean, that sounds as if I'm like, you better do me right here, but you know, for my personal journey with Richard Swan, this should be the final chance that I give him. If I don't like this book, then it is just that Richard Swan is not for me, and then I should stop giving in to temptation when I see the gorgeous covers. And then the final thing is actually 3 books, which I will just overlay an image of the 3 of them together because yeah, that is too much for me to hold up at once. And that is the Magician Trilogy by Raymond E. Feist. So this one is the massive one out of the series. The 2 other ones are very much shorter, luckily. But so yes, this is a series that is basically a side-to-side series along with the Empire trilogy, which was co-written by Raymond E. Feist and Jenny Woods. I have read the Empire trilogy when I was late teen, so when I was like at the end of high school, maybe already university, but I don't think so. I think I was still in high school when I read it, and I absolutely love it. But I didn't know until like I met one of my friends had a boyfriend who had read the Magician series, that there was actually a linked series. I hadn't had much of an interest in exploring the other side of the story, because basically there are like two kingdoms, and so the Empire trilogy is very much set in one, though we have a character coming from the other kingdom, but the Magician series is set in that other kingdom. I didn't have much of an interest in that kingdom, to be fair, but this cover design is by Jeffrey Brown, and whatever he designs, I am gonna be sucked into at least trying it because of how great the cover design is. So here's hoping that this is amazing. I do have my hesitations about the author because there is some problematic stuff in one of his books, not in one of the Magician books I think, but in a later book, in maybe like a spin-off series from this or something like that. I'm hoping that this doesn't happen with this series. It is like a book published in like what's the 90s, maybe even earlier than that. First edition is from 93, so it also doesn't fully surprise me to have like problematic or questionable content in there. It definitely was rife in that time, which doesn't mean that I want to seek it out, but it also means that I'm more likely to let it slide on the side of the author for being like what a lot of people were doing and what very few people were questioning at that time, and like the questioning was definitely not as much of a commonplace part of the discussions going on in like grand society to the extent that it would have like gotten through to everybody's mindset yet. So I do tend to let some of that not slide, but like not automatically like take that on as being like, oh my god, this is a super problematic author for something that they've written at a time in which society was definitely at a very different place. Though, you know, once I read it, if I ever read that particular scene, I might feel very differently about it, of course. But yeah, those are the final 3 books on this TBR. My TBR is some 8,000 pages, which is very much considering the fact that I read maybe like between 3,000 and 4,000, like I don't get to 4,000, somewhere in the 3,000s is where I typically tend to land in terms of the amount of pages that I read in a month, and so this is definitely like 3 months worth of books still on there. And let me tell you that I don't tend to read only TBR books in a month, so yeah, it is quite questionable whether I can like clear this bunch at least by the end of 2024. Jesus, my years, 2025. But let me be clear, I do not have the goal of having a 0 TBR by the end of 2025, you know, but my goal is definitely to keep the TBR low, and ideally I would like it to be under 10. So like we just need to curb our buying a little bit more in the months to come and slowly chip away at this in the hopes that, you know, by the end of 2025 we can securely keep it under the 10 book threshold. But so yeah, that has been the TBR part. Let me know if there's anything on here that, you know, you are excited about based on what I've talked about, or that you have found like, I don't know, experienced in your personal time. I don't know what I'm formulating here, but let me know which books you're most excited about on this TBR and which ones you maybe never had heard about before, and we can discuss those in the comments down below. See you guys for the next video. Bye!